That's right. I mean, making that personal phone call from Air Force One today to Marape's mobile showed just how much importance the US puts on Pacific Island leaders and, even PNG itself in its competition for influence with China, particularly now that China has shown with its Solomon Islands Security Pact last year that it's looking for a security presence in the Pacific Islands.
Yeah. So Antony Blinken will now go, the Secretary of State. Prime Minister Marape has also said that this pact is still a work in progress. Is it going to be ready in time to be signed with Secretary Blinken?
Look, Marape earlier this week and, last week, it's a long time in politics, but the former foreign minister had given every indication that agreement, the two agreements, but the defence cooperation agreement was finalised and was ready to sign. It was interesting, his language today, though, coming out of a cabinet meeting a day earlier, where he's really focusing on this is a framework agreement. That we want to get that framework agreement finalised. It will then go to Parliament for scrutiny. And underneath that, the nitty-gritty of what does it mean for PNG's airports, ports, boots on the ground, the harder stuff perhaps might come down the track. So I think it is quite likely that we'll see at least the shipwrighter agreement. This is the agreement for US Coast Guard vessels to be patrolling Papua New Guinea's vast exclusive economic zone, but also access to US satellite surveillance for that area will be signed. And also this umbrella agreement, which, I guess in plainer language, it's a status of forces agreement. These basic agreements that you'll see Australia, for example, signing with Japan recently, with Fiji, that allows two nations' militaries to train together and to operate together.
Yeah. So to that point, what might this US-PNG pact mean for Australia?
Well, I think it's very much in line with the message we saw coming out of the Defence Strategic Review that was launched last month. And the big message there was that Australia, is facing, increased risk that there could be, conflict in its neighbourhood, and it needs to partner more often with its allies and its friends. You'll see more training, more interoperability, not only with the US in Australia, but also with Pacific partners. There's an agreement that was reached with Fiji. Australia, signed another agreement with Vanuatu, although that's still to be ratified by its parliament. So it really does fit this pattern that you'll see these military forces training together more often and, be ready if the moment came that they could fight together at short notice.
Yeah. And to your point about the pact that Australia signed with Vanuatu, sometimes there are these broad-ranging agreements signed, but then when it gets before the domestic parliament, there are concerns raised. Do you think that could happen with this PNG-US pact?
It's really interesting. So certainly there's been concerns raised today and yesterday by, prominent opposition figures. But Marape has said, look, the government solicitor has looked at this. It's constitutional. It will be signed, and then for transparency, Parliament can look at it. So at least for that framework agreement, I'm not sure that it's something that needs to be ratified by the Parliament, but perhaps on more contentious. I mean, it looks like it's an agreement that paves the way for future US investment into big defence projects or defence infrastructure, and perhaps that's where there's going to be more parliamentary debate before there's signatures on those subsidiary agreements.
Yeah. To your point about Solomon Islands and China, what sort of reaction are we seeing from China, if any? There've been concerns that China's trying to get a foothold in the Pacific, but the same accusation could be levelled at the US.
I guess the US might say that it is a Pacific nation and it's been here, quite a long time. So there was nothing new with this. And Marape had said, this is an update of an agreement. You only have to look at the World War II history of Papua New Guinea and, Biden's own family members that had fought there during World War II, that there has, long been a US, military presence in the Pacific Islands region, where it's quite new for China to be coming in and signing security agreements. Look, we have seen in recent months, not overtly China saying anything, but, China-backed lobby groups really pushing for China to have a broader policing and security role in the region, particularly amongst Melanesian countries like Papua New Guinea, Vanuatu, Fiji, Solomon Islands have a intergovernmental group called the Melanesian Spearhead Group, which wants to look at whether they should have a sub-regional security agreement that would involve, have a role for China. So certainly that lobbying hasn't stopped.
Yeah. And also, of course, Narendra Modi, India's Prime Minister, will continue to go on his visit with Pacific leaders. What do you think will come out of those talks?
So these talks, which had been planned, well before the idea of a Biden visit, had popped up, are more focused on, economic ties, trade, humanitarian assistance. I think even things like India supplying generic medicines to the Pacific could be a real help. But it does fit within messages. India obviously is a member of the Quad, and we've seen in the last 12 months, whenever Quad foreign ministers or leaders meet, they make a statement about the need to cooperate as a group and also individually with the Pacific Island Forum. So you could see increased Indian economic aid as also fitting within the Quad's agenda of balancing out China's influence in the region.
Yeah, really interesting. Kirsty, great to have you on. Thanks so much.
Thanks for your time.